our country back. We want our country back. We want our country back. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. And I think that's given, again, every one of us in this hall that sense of mission. This is an incredible opportunity. We must not leave an ounce of energy unexpended. It's going to be close. We've got to get it over the line. Now, we're going to have some questions. And the first question is from Vic Robinson, and I think it indicates the real human aspect of the pressure on public services. Now, Vic, I'm going to read the question out as the way it will work, and then you'll get an answer from the three members of the panel, okay? So Vic's question is this: the National Health Service, primary care and schools up and down the country are drowning under the pressure of uncontrolled immigration. I'm suffering from cancer and cannot see a doctor till September. What can be done to improve things? Right. Should we start with Brendan? Do you want to?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, firstly, I think we all wish you all the very best in your fight against cancer, and we hope you recover and do. You're absolutely right. If you've got more people coming into a country and not enough investment in public services, demand increases, strain increases. Now, the only way you can combat that is to, firstly, A, invest more, but B, to have stricter controls on numbers coming in. And I think it's really unfortunate that the Remain side can't give us a straight answer on this. They were asked the other day, and today actually I heard Ian Dale on LBC saying to Nicky Morgan, you know, if we're going to stay in, how are you going to control immigration? She couldn't give an answer. The truth is we can't, all the while we're in. So the answer to your question, investment, but also stricter controls. Oh, you've got the microphone.
Yeah, I mean, look, you put your finger on this massive issue. You know, excessive. We're not against immigration, we want controlled, sensible immigration. But open door immigration has meant that the wages of an average worker have fallen in real terms by 10% since 2008. They've meant, as you're finding, getting a GP appointment, getting a hospital appointment is much longer than Nye Bevan dreamed of when the National Health was established all those years ago. We're finding we're going to be short at the moment, the guess is 200,000 primary school places by 2019. And how do our kids or grandkids aspire to what everybody in this room has done? How do they ever get a house? How do we satisfy demand when we have to build one new house every 4 minutes, night and day, to cope with current levels of migration? If we go on as we are, the British population will hit 80 million by 2040. And I would like to know what I'm told by Dave, as he likes to be called, when I'm told that the future is uncertain, we haven't got a plan. Well, Dave, can you tell us, if we're headed towards 80 million in 2040, how many schools, how many hospitals, how many roads are you going to build, and how much is it going to cost all the rest of us?
When I first began to raise the issue of immigration over 10 years ago in my constituency in Peterborough, I was called a racist, and I was told that the views were xenophobic and I should be quiet. And that was against the background of huge EU migration in this city. Between 2004 and 2011, 34,000 national insurance numbers were issued to people in a city of about 156,000. 68% of my primary school pupils don't have English as their first language. Now, that is a massive issue in terms of resources. I think it's quite legitimate for a Member of Parliament to raise those issues. And sadly, my party has for too long not listened over these issues. In December 2014, I was invited to Chequers with Dave. And I said to him in no uncertain terms, you have got to do something about this issue of immigration. And you've got to come clean, and you've got to keep your pledges that you made at the Bloomberg speech in 2013, that free movement will be at the centre of your renegotiation. And he said, yes, I've heard it. I've heard the message. He went to the renegotiation with a threadbare case and got nothing. And I feel particularly let down, because when he sits in a TV studio and says, actually, free movement is inviolate, there's nothing we can do about it, we can have no truck with any reduction in immigration under free movement because it's more important to safeguard the shareholder value of European multinationals, I think that is someone who's got their priorities completely wrong.
Right, the next question is from Luke Shacklock, and he wants to know, why has the debate on sovereignty not taken prominence on the Remain side's argument? Does this suggest they feel they have lost that argument? Should we start with Nigel?
Well, they've lost the argument on sovereignty and self-government. They've lost the argument on democracy. They now try and say that actually the European Commission is democratic because they're appointed by people who've been elected. It's about as good as they can get. Generally, the European Commission, of course, is stuffed with failures. From Roy Jenkins through to Neil Kinnock, you know, through to, oh, I've got better than that for you, through to Chris Patton, through to Baroness Ashton, and the icing on the cake, Lord Mandelson. So there we are. Ever a pantomime's going badly, just mention Mandy, and it's sorted. So they've lost so they don't want to engage in a democratic argument. They don't want to engage in the immigration argument. All they want to do is scare you with an economic argument that is not based on the reality of world trade. As I said to you earlier, they're threatening us, they're bullying us, and frankly, for George Osborne today to have said there'd need to be an emergency budget, when this is the man that's got all his numbers wrong. This is the man who, as Chancellor, managed in 5 years to double our national debt. I hope that the bonus ball of next week winning this referendum lottery is that people like George Osborne are slung out of public life for the way they behave forever. Disgusting man.
Well, I can't but agree with Nigel on that. I mean, there are two pensioners that are very worried about Brexit, Lady Kinnock and Lord Kinnock. The fact is that we've had this cultural cringe to all things European for many, many years, as if we never traded before 1973, as if we never made our own laws before 1973, as if we were never a proud, outward-looking global nation before 1973. And the vested interest, the establishment, the media, the multinationals, most of the trade unions, the Labour Party, the political class, are invested in the European Union. And why they're so terrified, and I've enjoyed watching some of my colleagues in Parliament this week, they can see that they've put everything on red and it's going to come up black, and they've backed the wrong horse. They cannot cope with demos, the power of the people. They can denigrate and sneer at people like Polly Toynbee did the other day in The Guardian. Little people do as you're told. But at the end of the day, at about 5 o'clock on the 24th of June, the people will have spoken.
Well, the next question is just for Nigel, and it's becoming a bit of a tradition in Peterborough when Nigel comes, and he came a couple of months ago. He was invited to a wedding, as I recall. What? Well, this question's from Rosanna Pinto, who asks, Nigel, would you be available on August the 6th to attend my daughter, I think it's Romina's 40th birthday party?
Oh, well, where are you? Who asked the question? That's a lovely offer, thank you. And I can't promise I'll be there, but I'll put it in my diary and I'll have a think about it, and thank you.
There you go.
Amazing, isn't it?
Right, next question from Chelsea Cross and Shannon Creaser. Chelsea 16, Shannon is 17. As two 16 and 17-year-old students, what does the future hold for us in terms of places to live, employment opportunities and healthcare services if we remain in the EU? And they add, why have we not been invited to vote like in the Scottish referendum? It is, after all, our future you are deciding. Don't know who wants to...
Well, just firstly, there was a motion in the House of Commons as to whether or not the voting age just for this referendum should be lowered to 16 and 17, and the House of Commons voted it down. Personally, I wouldn't have minded. I agree. I don't know where you are in the audience, but though you're there, okay, I wouldn't have minded. I think you should have been allowed to vote. I'm in favour of that anyway. In terms of outside the staying in the EU, I mean, one thing you do know is that we're not voting for the status quo in this referendum. There's either leave or there's further integration, further loss of sovereignty, further uncontrolled immigration. That's really what it should say on the ballot. So if we stay, increased pressure on public services, increased competition for getting on the housing ladder, increased competition for jobs, increased competition for accessing other services that would be needed for you. In terms of if we leave, I think it's been spelt out today by all the speakers on the panel, open to the world. You know, why are we constraining, particularly the younger generation at this time, when in a second money can move like that over the world, where you can tweet and it can be seen by millions of people, where over Skype you can be in touch with people in seconds. Why are we constricting ourselves to a model designed and built in the 1950s when we're living in the modern world? I think younger people particularly should be confident about leaving and confident about returning to the global world.
No, I'm happy with that. Not better than that.
Right, the next question is from a great East of England UKIPper, Mick Kennedy. I can see him at the back in the Union Jack jacket. Tremendous. Now, Mick wants to know, if Britain remains in the EU, will the next British Prime Minister have to kiss Mrs. Merkel's hand, and swear allegiance to the EU under the EU flag? And Mick adds that Mr. Farage might be interested to know that a majority of Colchester Garrison want to leave and to stay in the British Army.
Yeah, well, he's sitting there, is he? Yeah. Yeah. Come on, stand up, stand up. Give us a whirl, give us a twirl. Very good, very good. Excellent. Look, don't ask me what's going to happen if Remain win this referendum. That's like asking a general going into battle, what will he do if he loses? I'm not contemplating defeat, and I feel ever more confident over the last couple of weeks that we are, next Thursday, going to make history and going to make June the 23rd, from here on, our Independence Day. We are going to win this. European Army, anybody?
Well, as my colleagues have said, there are massive risks with Remain. As has been reported this week, the possibility of having a tax code for every EU citizen, the possibility of a European army deploying our armed forces, not under a British general, but under a general of a European defence force. And essentially, we may not have another opportunity to change that. So we have to win. If we don't want more powers to be transferred to a supranational body like the European Court of Justice, which strikes down our laws, why would any country agree to a situation where Abu Hamza's daughter cannot be removed from the United Kingdom because her human rights as an EU citizen is infringed? It's Alice in Wonderland madness. And there are other things too, including, inevitably, I think, the Eurozone will go pop and we will need another, cope with another Greek default. It is a very worrying situation, and next Thursday is your last opportunity to stop that happening.
Quite right.
Thank you, Stuart. And I have to say the idea of the student politicians of Brussels with their inbuilt sense of moral superiority directing the finest, bravest young people in this country into conflict zones with no measuring of whether the British national interest at stake is something that makes my blood run cold, and we must not allow that to happen. Now, the next question is from another real stalwart of UKIP in Peterborough down the years, Frances Fox. Yes, a magnificent contribution that Frances has made down the years. Now, she wants to know, those who wish us to remain in the EU say we will lose jobs if we leave. Shouldn't we remind them that joining the EU meant that we lost jobs in the fishing industry, the cotton industry, the steel industry, the mining industry, and the farming industry too? Perhaps, Brendan, you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, just specifically on mining. I mean, not only have we lost jobs in the steel industry, we're not able, through government intervention, to help them. Because EU state aid laws say that a government, any government, cannot intervene in the marketplace, which could ultimately distort the marketplace. And so they're telling us if we leave, oh, jobs will go to the wall and we'll all be ruined. But actually our current terms mean we can't help create jobs. And of course, the EU job creating myth, I mean, I don't think it's very real for the people of Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, all the countries of the member states, where unemployment is rising, wages are going down, and where competition for jobs is increasing. It is a total myth that the EU is a job creator. Governments don't create jobs, businesses create jobs. That's where jobs come from. And then taxes are raised from businesses to support services that people need. And so I think the Remain side really are spreading scandalous lies on this. And this notion that if we leave, we're all going to become unemployed, you know, barcodes in supermarkets won't work and everything will go to the wall, is claptrap, really. It's because they've got nothing to offer. Our side's the optimistic side.
Well, I suppose we have to be honest. You know, all economic arguments have two sides, and we have to be frank and accept that in a certain sector, some jobs will be lost. That Patrick and I will lose our jobs as MEPs, and we are the turkeys that will vote for Christmas. Yeah, job centre, MEP seeks work.
Little useful experience of anything whatsoever, I suppose. Right, then the next question again relates to today's events on the Thames, and this comes from John Lindsay, who wants to know, following the Thames flotilla fracas, as well as forming an EU army, should they also perhaps form an EU Navy too?
Well, in some ways they have already, because there have been a cooperative naval venture taking part in the Gulf, looking and trying to deal with Somali pirates, albeit with very weak rules of engagement. Be in no doubt. You know, 2 years ago, I did 2 one-hour televised debates up against Nick Clegg. Remember him? You do remember him. Some of you remember him. Anyway. And in those debates I said that, and rather as Stuart has just said now, I said one of the risks of staying in is we will have a European Army, Navy and Air Force. And Clegg dismissed me as a dangerous fantasist. And what we know is the plan to start the proper debate, albeit the command structure is in place already, but to start the proper debate about the implementation of a European army begins, guess when? On the 24th of June. All right? And I view this as being a very dangerous development. We've already seen, when the European Union interfered in the Ukraine, whatever we thought of the Ukrainian leader. He was a democratically elected leader who was brought down by EU interference, which then led to Putin going into the Crimea. I do not want my foreign policy or my troops in the Army, Air Force or Navy, I do not want them being dictated to by anybody in Brussels ever, and we must fight it, and we must win this referendum. Patrick, just one or two more, I think.
Can I agree with Nigel, his earlier comments? I think the sight of this overbearing, arrogant Irish loudmouth, this superannuated soap dodger, Bob Geldof, sneering at and sticking two fingers up at salt to the earth, decent people, incidentally one of whom is dying of cancer, right, and belittling them and attacking them. Being cheered on by a lot of rowdy Hooray Henry, Tarquin and Jocastas, with their asti spermanti and their organic tofu on his fancy yacht, strikes at the heart of what British people think is correct, is appropriate and right and fair play. And sticking your two fingers up, which will be all over the papers, as Nigel said, tomorrow, that really is a caricature which goes to the heart of this. That the people will not be told how to vote. They will not be bullied and threatened and cajoled by people who think that they're superior, and they will have the final say. And I'll be quite happy to get in a tug with my tug and tow Sir Bob out to sea and pull the plug out.
I was well behaved compared to him. I have to do it, baby.
Well done, Stuart. I have to note that in that the same debate that Nigel referred to with Nick Clegg, that did so much good service actually to the cause of Euroscepticism, well, it did us wonders, and it boosted our membership figures, because Nigel launched the idea of the People's Army. And I think, never mind the EU Navy, today it looked like we had a People's Navy on the Thames as well. Now, we have time for two more quick questions. The first one is from Leighton Mills, and Leighton wants to know, what will you all do to ensure that an outvote will be upheld and implemented by Parliament?
Well, interesting, isn't it? Interesting, isn't it, that earlier on, Stuart talked about the Kinnocks. Lord Kinnock. Lady Kinnock. But maybe the biggest boo of all should be for Stephen Kinnock. Because what he said last week is that if the British people vote to leave the European Union, Parliament may well go against their will and keep them inside the single market. Now, I think that this country is very slow to anger. But I think those people that have made their minds up to vote to leave would, if you asked them on Thursday, crawl over broken glass and vote in blood, so determined are they to get back our country. And I think that if this generation of Kinnocks and others try to defy the will of the people, they will see a political backlash unlike anything that has ever been seen before in our history, and will sweep them out of Parliament in 2020.
I think if there's any collusion of the political class to set their face against the legitimate, fair and open referendum next Thursday, and the settled will of the people of this country to leave the European Union, they will be driven from office, and rightly so. And I can tell you, from my own party, about 140 Conservative MPs have declared for leave. But if it had been a free vote, or indeed if the Prime Minister had advocated, seems a ridiculous concept now, but had he advocated a leave vote, there would be about 25 Euro-fanatic, Euro-federasts in the Conservative Party for whom the EU is like the Holy Grail, like a religion, a sort of cult, and that's all. Those people, even they would be loath to tolerate the direct refusal to accept the will of the people. And just a few hundred yards from the Chamber of the Commons is Westminster Hall, where King Charles I went on trial for his life for treason, for making war against his own people. The people in history have spoken, and they've spoken very loudly, and any government that refuses to listen will pay an extremely heavy price.
Just very, very quickly, 11 Labour members of Parliament have declared for Brexit. If there was a free vote, I know there would be at least 32. And unfortunately, my party is not allowing a free vote, which I think is totally wrong. Just to echo what everybody else has said, I think if Parliament did go against the will of the people, I think we go and meet them. We turn up. The day they try to do it, we're there. We storm the place and we force them to do it.
What, Tyler? I'm fine. I'm happy with it, yeah.
Right, now to our last question from Dick Wells. And he says that given half the present cabinet is part of the In campaign, who should negotiate the terms of our departing the European Union in the event of an out vote? Fancy it, Nigel?
Don't be me. Don't be me. No, look, the idea, I'm sorry, the idea that this Prime Minister and this Chancellor, having behaved as despicably as they have in this campaign, could, in the advent of an out vote, be trusted to negotiate Britain's exit from the European Union is utterly ludicrous and cannot be allowed to happen, all right? And when it comes to the renegotiation, I'm struck there are two Conservative members of Parliament with genuine experience of this. One, Peter Lilly, who actually was at the Department of Trade and Industry at the time the single market regulations were coming in, and the other, David Davis, who of course was Europe Minister at the time of the Maastricht Treaty. And whatever the Conservative government decide to do, whoever their new leader is, they must use that huge well of talent and experience that Lilly and Davis have got. They really must.
I agree with Nigel, and I think there are very good people, Bill Cash, John Redwood. These are the people that have been courageous and consistently right over the last 30 years in battling against the EU within their own party, and particularly Bill Cash, and I pay huge tribute to what Bill has done. I mean, Bill is about 76, 77 now. He's been fighting the EU in Parliament, a very lonely fight. I mean, I've seen Bill, you know, belittled by the Prime Minister in meetings as a sort of crank, and actually Bill will be vindicated very fully next Thursday when we win the EU referendum. But I'll be quite straightforward with you. Even if I was the Prime Minister's greatest champion, I know it's difficult to imagine, he will have no credibility after a leave vote. Why would you go to Brussels and humiliate yourself when he will have failed to deliver the project for them? He'll have no credibility with the electorate and even less credibility with his own parliamentary party. So for his best interests, if there is a leave vote, his position is untenable and he has to go quite quickly, probably after appointing a top-notch negotiation team, including, for instance, Michael Gove.
One of the things that this referendum has done, it has divided the country in terms of opinion, and I think whoever is leading the renegotiation post-Brexit, part of their job is to bring the country back together again. And so I think actually it wouldn't be a bad idea for a sort of commission to be appointed, made up of Brexiteers, if you like, from all parties, including UKIP, Labour, Conservatives, some of the SNP Brexiteers, and there are also some Plaid Brexiteers, bring everyone together so we have a truly national withdrawal from the European Union. No party is then favoured over another, and we have try and build consensus amongst the people, because I think we've got to try and do that after the referendum.
Very I think so, yeah.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, has this put fire in your bellies for next week? Yes, good. I've been told that what we need to put in the front of your minds are leaflets and Corex boards. They're all out there. Take them away with you, disperse them widely, display them. Let everyone in Peterborough, North West Cambridgeshire, Huntingdon, St Neots, St Ives, wherever else you've come from, know that that's the feeling of the people on the streets. It can sway people at the last moment if they see they live in a street, in a neighbourhood where people have got the courage of their convictions, are going to kick off the idea of political correctness and retake their country. So just by putting a board up, you might get an extra voter, and it's going to be close. Well, I also say that the tables are out there where you can sign up to help in Peterborough in particular on the day next Thursday, and we'd be so appreciative of anyone who can do that. So give a really big hand, please, tonight for your speakers. First of all, for your tremendous, courageous, principled local MP, Stuart Jackson.
Well done, Stuart. Very good. Very good. Very. Oh, he's very. He said a lot too.
And secondly, for one of the driving forces of Labour Leave, and I really think in the last couple of weeks in particular, it's the flourishing and the proliferation of the Labour Leave movement that really has given our campaign such impetus. And this man is a man who's been willing to take on, you know, unpopularity at senior ranks of his own party, you know, sarcastic comments, whatever it might be, because he knows, unlike Councillor Murphy from Ravensthorpe Ward in Peterborough, he knows that working people, long-term Labour voters, they're not voting out because they're uneducated. They're voting out because they're patriotic, they believe in their country, and they know that the EU has delivered a rotten deal for themselves and their families. So this man has been a tremendous campaigner for the last few months. Brendan Chilton. And finally, to the man without whom none of this exciting episode in our democracy, none of the trauma that the political class is going through at the unexpected turn of events that the people haven't turned out to be lemmings, none of it would have been possible. We know David Cameron did not want to give a referendum. He stood up in the House of Commons time after time and said it wouldn't be in the national interest, and then the Farage boot began to exert a little light pressure on the prime ministerial throat, and he was forced to buckle and to give that promise of a referendum. He probably never thought he would have to deliver it. He has been made to deliver it, and Nigel is playing a blinder in this cross-party campaign that's taken us to the brink of doing what the political class thought would never happen in a million years. So massive applause to Nigel Farage.
Thank you. Thank you, boys. Brilliant. Well done. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Right, let's go out there and win back our country. Come on.
You're right. We want our country back. There we are. We want our country back. Hello, Francis. How are you? All right.